YouTube, I beat the first PvP event in Pokemon TCG Pocket. I got the 45 wins to get the gold emblem, and let me tell you guys how I did it. I used the Wigglytuff EX deck I recommended to you guys in my previous video where you pair Wigglytuff EX with Weezing, and it was a very good combo, and I got most of my wins today from this deck right here. So the deck list is 2 Coughings, 2 Weezings, we have 2 Jigglypuff, 2 Wigglytuff EX, and a single Wigglytuff regular. Now the reason why I use the regular Wigglytuff is because there's certain scenarios that you're going to get into where you can actually use the regular Wigglytuff, which means you will not lose 2 points if it dies. There have been scenarios where I used this and actually got some wins because I used it as a tank to die and still had enough points where I could use my Wigglytuff EX and I didn't lose. I had to lose 3 Pokemon instead of 2 typically, what people would typically have to kill a Wigglytuff EX and a Weezing. So I just use this to help in those scenarios to give me an extra body that can actually go down. Then I use 2 X Speeds, 2 Pokeballs, 2 Professor Oaks, 2 Kogas, 1 single Giovanni, and 2 Sabrinas. So this deck is actually pretty versatile. I really enjoyed playing this deck a lot all day today. It's a very fun deck. There were some scenarios that made me think that this deck is a little bit more challenging to use in certain scenarios. I feel like a few of the other decks in the game are pretty straightforward, like Pikachu and Mewtwo and Charizard, Venusaur. They're all pretty straightforward of how they want you to play them. There's pretty much maybe like one main strategy that you want to do, and they typically do them. But this particular deck is kind of versatile. It has a main, I guess, way that you could try to play it. It may not be like your normal scenario that you may normally see, that you could kind of like outplay your opponent. There was plenty of times when I was playing this deck and I was just sitting there thinking to myself like, man, I really just outplayed this player right here to get this win. And I feel like with the other decks, I don't really have to do that. There's some times where you may be playing and it may feel like you might be about to lose, but then there's some strategies that you might be able to employ and you might be able to actually steal a win from the player. And this deck is very fun to play. The Wigglytuff EX can be played multiple ways. The current way that I ran it was just with the Weezings, but people also can play it with the Arbok instead of the Weezing. And I think that can create its own benefits to playing it, but the way that I was running it was with this. And in my last video, I told you guys that I suspected that during this event, you were going to see a lot of Pikachus and a lot of Mewtwo decks in this event, but I didn't see as many as I thought. Now, I did see a lot of them, but not more than what I was expecting. So pretty much a lot of people have been using multiple decks. A lot of decks that I didn't think would be shown in this event were showing up. So I was like, okay, that's good. So a lot of people are still trying to use a lot of fun decks, rogue or anti-meta decks, and just trying to play and have fun and use different decks than the decks that you typically see all the time. And so it was pretty fun to play against a lot of different decks besides just the typical top 2. You will still see a lot of those, and this Wigglytuff deck does really well against Mewtwo, and against the Pikachu deck it can struggle a little bit because the Pikachu deck can be a little bit too fast, but you can hold your own. You just definitely can't do any misplays. You pretty much have to play pretty well and have a good hand, but it's still beatable, and I've beaten the Pikachu deck a bunch of times today, so it is possible. The deck that I was having problems with playing was the Blaine deck with the Ninetales and the Rapidash. That deck seems to give the Wigglytuff deck some problems because it's so fast paced and it can kind of just keep up the pressure consistently. And the Wigglytuff deck needs time to set up, and it has the wall with the Weezing, and you know, Wigglytuff takes 3 energy, so it does take some time to kind of set up. So the faster paced decks are going to be the ones that are going to be a lot harder to win, and you're going to have to really come up with some good strategies to kind of keep the pressure off you or be able to stall long enough to where you can kind of get a good setup with the Weezing and the Wigglytuff. The Articuno decks did pretty good against this deck as well. Not saying that I didn't win any, but I'm just saying that those are the ones that were giving me really tough fights where I was just, you know, it was going neck and neck, you know, or something like that, or I had to come up with some kind of crazy way to win. But this is this deck does pretty well against most decks pretty much, and it's great to use. So I recommend it, I was able to do the whole event in one day, pretty much primarily using this one. I would, just like I recommended yesterday, this deck is very fun. You're going to be able to put a lot of pressure on people. So what I really like to do is I like to poison the opponent and then I put them to sleep. And what a lot of people don't realize is that you can have both of those statuses going on one Pokemon at a time. So that's great. So the active Pokemon can be asleep and have poison draining it as well. And what some players don't understand is that once their active Pokemon is asleep, you can't attack with that Pokemon and you cannot retreat that Pokemon. There was plenty of times when I was catching players off guard and they didn't realize that you can't retreat that Pokemon. You would see them use their X speed and they realized they couldn't retract their active Pokemon that was asleep. They would concede and then I would win that match right after that. So this deck right here is very, very fun, man. I recommend you guys going out there and trying it. See how you like it. I think it's very, very fun. It doesn't hit as hard as some of these other decks, and that's where sometimes you might start to see the problem with like a Starmie or Articuno deck that can hit pretty hard and hit fast. This one can't hit any harder than about 90, I guess, and typically that's not that much, but I mean for 3 energy, that's costing a lot for you to only hit 90. But the fact that you can put the Pokemon to sleep and with the poison, that's going to be the extra stuff that's going to help you win games. Yes, this deck technically is a coin flip deck, but it's not as reliant on the coin flip as, like, let's say, I don't know, like the Marowak deck or something like that, or using Executor EX. This one does depend on it, but not every single time. I've won plenty of matches of just over attacking a mon that was about to die, and I didn't need them to go to sleep. You guys should use it. This one works very well for me, so I would recommend using this one. The Pikachu EX deck did very well in this tournament for me as well, and the Starmie Articuno deck was very, very fun to use. But of course, like always, use the decks that you like to use, that are fun for you, that you enjoy playing. But this one is one deck that I like to use, and it was different from what you were typically seeing. This event was fun. It was a grind, man. It was a grind to get this all, and I did it all less than 24 hours. That was a grind. But this deck will definitely help you get some wins, man. It is going to be a grind because obviously it's going to go up and down. But this deck right here is actually a sleeper. So no pun intended, but this deck is actually a sleeper. Definitely try this one out, man. Catch your opponents off guard, get them to sleep, get them poisoned, and I'll catch you guys on the next one, man.